What's good, y'all? It's Icon here talking a little Flash before the crisis. This is a two-part episode in which when we left the last episode, Ralph was getting rolled up on by blood, what is it? Blood sport? Bloodshot? I forgot what we call it. So, Ramsey. So anyway, he's fighting Ramsey, and during the fight, he ends up like injecting, Ralph. He ends up injecting Ralph with like his blood, his black blood goo or whatever the hell. So Ralph ends up going into like shock or whatever. Killer Frost finds him. They take him back to Star Labs. Ralph is just like, he's losing his shit. Caitlin is not Caitlin, but Killer Frost is freaking out because she doesn't know how to help him. So she switches back to Caitlin, and then Caitlin's like, well, in order for us to save him, we're gonna have to give him a blood transfusion from the Flash, because the Flash has Flash healing powers. So they do the blood transfusion because they can't puncture anything into his skin because his skin's made out of rubber. So they do the blood transfusion, and Ralph's okay, but here's how they get Ralph out of the crisis. They say that the blood transfusion went okay, but they're gonna send him to Argus for for studying and monitoring and testing or whatever. And I thought I find it interesting that they actually said they were gonna send him to Argus, because for those that watch Legends of Tomorrow, there was the reason why Zari is even on the Wave Rider is because Zari says that in the future Argus becomes a rogue agency whose job is basically capturing and experimenting on metas. So the fact that Ralph, and it's like they never really touched on that, and they should touch on that because that's an interesting story. So to hear that, it's just like, all right, maybe this is the start of what Legends talked about with Argus going rogue, but we'll see. So Ralph is gone. After that, Barry ends up, hallucinating, feeling a little sick, and then he passes out. He sees his mom, which is basically the Speed Force. His mom has because they did that before, where like the Speed Force came to Barry in the form of his mother, and the Speed Force basically told Barry, they were like, look, Ramsey's blood is in your system, like a drop of it got into your system because of the blood transfusion, and because of the blood transfusion, once you get him into your system, he's like slowly trying to take over your body now. So Barry's trying to fight, he's trying to keep Ramsey out of his system. Ramsey ends up coming to him, like in a vision, because he's inside him now, so he can get into his head. He's just like, oh, Barry Allen's the Flash, and you got struck by lightning, and he was like, oh, there's a crisis coming that you've known about for 6 years, and you've prepared nothing. And then and then he actually says to Barry, he was just like, I know you saw visions of like the future or whatever. And then he's like, what part in this crisis did I play? And then Barry's like, you didn't play a part in it. You weren't there. And then Ramsey's like, really? Like, not even one vision? So I'm like, all right, so Ramsey's not going to be in the crisis. So that's confirmed. So it was basically, so once as the infection grew stronger, they like Ramsey was like taking Barry through like these weird hallucinations. Like he showed everybody at a Thanksgiving dinner table where they were all eating food, and then there was like blood coming out. There was like black goo coming out of everybody's mouth. He showed him Nora as a baby, which was kind of heartbreaking because Barry even said to Ramsey, he was like, hey, look, I know this isn't real, but let me just hold her for like 2 seconds. And then he was like, no, Barry, you do nothing. So that was kind of sad. And then, then Barry, after a while, like, it started getting to him. And then the Speed Force came back because she was like, yo, snap out of it. Like, he's trying to get you. And then Barry kind of, like, turned on the Speed Force. He was just like, no. He was like, this is all your fault. He's like, since day one, you made me the Flash. And you've got me doing all this crazy stuff. And you're the reason why. I'm doing. He's like, I've done all this for you. Like, I've done this for the Speed Force. Like, you've never done anything for me. And, Barry ended up, like, losing it. And then it gets into a battle where the Speed Force and Barry are basically like, well, not Barry, the Speed Force and Ramsey are fighting for control of Barry, because Ramsey's trying to take over Barry, but he can't take over Barry because of the Speed Force 1, and his healing power is kind of like fighting it. So in the end, like, Barry ends up, he ends up like, fighting with all his might, and then he comes out of the coma because he had passed out. He was in Star Labs, like, passed out on the table. He comes out of the coma, and then they're just like, hey, are you okay? And then he was just like, yeah, Ramsey tried to take control of me, but I beat him, and the Flash is back. So then everybody's like, all right, cool, so you good. You good. So then, while everybody's okay, like, he's talking to everybody and everybody's okay, and they're like, Barry's fine or whatever, Iris shows up, And then Barry's like on the board, like doing some stuff on the board. Iris comes up. She's like, "Hey, like I heard you passed out and you were going through something. Are you okay?" And then he's just like, "Yeah, get off my back, woman." And then she told Cisco and Caitlin. She was like, "Yo, that's not Barry." And then when Barry turns around, his eyes are black. There's like black goo coming out of his mouth. And then you find out that the infection actually won. Like the infection beat the Speed Force, and Barry is now infected. And Ramsey controls the Flash now. The Flash ended up running out of Star Labs, and then he runs to Ramsey, and Ramsey's like, "I control the Flash now, so now the pain shall begin." And then Flash is all like, "Yes, master." And then and that was it. So that's where the two-parter, that's where it said to be continued. So right before the crisis, I mean, obviously, because we didn't see the Crisis commercial, so obviously like they're gonna break him out of it. Like it was a very bad cliffhanger to make that a two-part episode when we know they save him in like part 2. Because if they didn't, so unless that's Ramsey during the entire crossover, the interesting thing will be how they save him and what happens to Ramsey. Like, do they defeat Ramsey in the next episode and then he goes away for a while, or to eventually come back in the season finale, or will he continue to plague the team throughout the course of the season? So on a side mission for Iris, teams. Well, remember last episode, like Wells had told Allegra that Barry was the Flash. So Allegra's like snooping around like Iris's office. She sees the newspaper article that says Flash vanishes in crisis, and she wants to, because she's mad nosy. Like she wants to know a lot of stuff that's none of her business, and then. And then remember, like Ralph had given Iris the information about her cousin Esperanza. So Iris comes up to Allegra and she's like, "Yo, I got some information about how we can help your cousin." And then she's like, "Well, isn't there another story you want to talk about?" And she's like, "No, this is your cousin. Let's do this." So Camilla, Iris, and Allegra, they go, because like there's a guy who. He was working for the bad guys who were in control of Esperanza the first time. They recognized him from the club situation that Barry and Ralph went to. So they roll up on him in a parking lot and they're just like, "Yo, we got footage of you doing dirty dastardly deeds." Come to find out, like his whole role in the thing is he's just a guy, like whenever criminals get together to share criminal secrets or to put things on an auction, when they want to auction like jewelry, diamonds, like weapons of mass destruction, whatever. He's the guy that basically transports those items from one place to another. They called him like an evil, like a villain Uber driver or whatever. So he was just like, yeah, he said, "That's all I do." So they're just like, "All right, our bad." And then, Iris was like, "Yo, we're going to keep looking into this." And Allegra was just like, "Oh, but what about, your husband being the Flash?" And she's like, "Who told you that?" And then she's like, "Wells told me that." And she's like, "You can't tell Barry's identity." And then she was just like, I wasn't going to spill the beans on Barry's identity. But she's like, "I saw the article with you doing the crisis, writing about some crisis that's coming, and you don't look like you're going to finish the article." And Iris is like, "No, because it's not time for that yet." And then she was just like, "Nah, I just think you don't want to do it because it hurts." And I'm like, "Well, duh, like of course it's like nobody wants to write about like their fiance's death, but then she told Iris, she was just like, "Listen," she was like, "When you first did like when she had her blog in like season 1, she was like, I used to read it in Iron Heights when you were talking about the streak." And she was like, "You're the reason why I wanted to become a journalist." And she was like, like, "I don't know how you're going to do this because obviously this hurts." She was like, "But you're strong. And I know for a fact that you're going to, you'll regret it." She was like, "You'll regret it if you don't write it." So she was just like, "You're going to get up on it." And then Iris was like, "All right." So then the three of them end up going. So then Joe calls them. Like Joe ends up calling Iris. The three of them go back to the parking lot where they rolled up on the dude, and then Joe was like, "Yeah, like the guy that you were talking to, he's dead. Somebody killed him." So now they're just like, all right, they're investigating Esperanza's death, and while they're not her death, they're investigating like Esperanza and the people behind controlling her. And while they're investigating it, and they're talking to the people, who are responsible for like taking control of her. The person that they talk to ends up dying. So they're just like, all right, so there's like more going on here. And I like that. I like the fact that this story, this Central City storyline is going to continue because it'll give those three something to do outside of like all the superhero Flash stuff. Like they got their own little mission going on, and like I'm definitely I definitely want to see what the three ladies can do, and then Camilla like Allegra is just like, "Well, shouldn't you tell like your husband's friend, and Iris is like, oh nah. She was like, Camilla knows they buried the Flash, and then she was like, yeah, because Cisco used to be Vibe, and she's like, nobody tells me anything, whatever, which is kind of cool. So for part two of this episode, it picks up with the Flash still under. Well, we're calling him Bloodwork now. He's under Bloodwork's control, and Bloodwork is actually like he's infecting the city. Like he's touching people, like he's filling them full of the goo. Cisco, Cisco, and Iris, they're at Star Labs. They're trying to figure out how they can stop it. And all Iris is thinking about is like how to get Barry. But well, they're both thinking about how to get Barry back. Like Cecile and Camilla, they're under attack at the Central City Citizen, and Joe and Caitlin, they go out into the streets to try to I guess save the people or to try. I mean, I guess to stop Ramsey because the cops were there. Like the cops were trying to. It's very awkward because on one hand you're trying to stop these people from infecting other people, but like Joe said, he was like they're innocent people, so you don't want to like hurt them, but they're gonna hurt you. So so everybody's out there. Flash is going around bringing Ramsey the victims. And then Cisco puts the barrier around Star Labs to keep to keep the Flash out. Iris ends up going rogue. Allegra shows up. Like when Joe, because I think Joe got stabbed by something. Like he got stabbed in the back, and then Joe was down. Allegra showed up, so like Allegra and Killer Frost helped Joe get back to Star Labs. So then Iris decides to Barry had spoken to Iris, and then he was just like, meet me at the place where our life began, which is like their apartment. So Cisco was like, don't do it, and then she was just like, no, for better or for worse, because Iris is real like that. So so she jumps in the portal. She goes back to their apartment. She's talking to Ramsey. She's talking to Barry. She's talking to Ramsey through Barry. And, Ramsey, like, yokes her up, and then he's just like, join me willingly. And then she's like, no. And then, he doesn't, he ends up letting her go. He was like, all right, I'm gonna let you go. But he was like, but soon all shall perish. And then he leaves. And I thought it was weird that he didn't kill her, because I'm like, I guess Barry's still in there, because there was no reason for Ramsey to not, end her at that, end her at that point. So she goes back to Star Labs. Cisco comes up with some cockamamie Star Labs Cisco idea on how to it was like a ray gun. They were gonna shoot the rays into Ramsey, and the rays were supposed to defeat him and bring everybody else back to life. Cisco shoots his weapon. It doesn't work. Ramsey then rolls up on Cisco, and he's just like, Cisco, I chose you. We're gonna go to Star Labs, and and then we're gonna infect the world. Blah ha 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 ha. And then and then Cisco got scared, and he ran. He portaled back to Star Labs, because Ramsey's whole plan is he's going to create another particle accelerator explosion. But what he's going to do is he's going to put his blood into the particle accelerator, and then when the particle accelerator explodes with his blood in it, it'll airborne infect every single person in Star City. Central City. I keep calling it Star City. It'll infect every single person in Central City, and then that's how he'll affect everybody on a larger scale, instead of having Barry just keep constantly sending him sending him people one at a time. So that's the plan. Then Iris and Cisco, they're just like, oh, we failed. We both individually failed. And then Killer Frost is freaking out because Joe's hurt, and then Killer Frost doesn't know how to help him. And then she lets Caitlin come back, and then Iris and Cisco, they thought about it. They were just like, wait, Barry said, I'm coming home, and then she was like, I was begging him to come home, and I said that to him earlier, and then he was just like, yeah, Ramsey told me. He's like, I chose you for a reason, and those were Barry's exact words. And they were both just like, maybe that's Barry trying to tell us something. That's Barry trying to, give us a clue. And then Cisco thought about it, and he was just like, yeah, because then he kept saying something about, let the light in. Barry actually said, he's like, let the light in. And then Cisco was just like, yes, so what he's like, I figured out how to beat him. So what they did was, so when Ramsey got into Star Labs, because they let him in, him and the Flash go downstairs. He puts his blood into the machine. He ends up setting the particle accelerator to explode. Barry's yoking up Iris, and Cisco's down for the count. And then, he's just like, in a few moments, my blood will infect the world. And then, Iris always keeps Iris is about it, because, she always keeps, a gun, a taser, or something. She always keeps something handy. So she comes out with the gun, she blasts, she blasts Ramsey, she blasts Barry. Both of them are down. And then Allegra shows up, and then she's just like, what do you need? And, Cisco was just like, because of your UV rays, there's her UV rays can counteract the blood sport stuff. So he was just like, his blood is already in the particle accelerator, and when it explodes, like his energy will shoot out. Cisco was like, when his energy shoots out, he was like, shoot your energy into it. Your energy will counteract it, because because he said that her wave energy is like the cure. So her energy it'll get rid of Ramsey's blood energy, replace it with her positive energy, and then that positive wave will flow through everybody in the city, and it'll cure everybody instead of making them, like slaves. And it worked. It worked, and then Ramsey ended up, he escaped Star Labs. Barry was okay. Barry, he ended up being okay. He goes after Ramsey. Ramsey now has the ability to turn into a giant monster. And when he turned into the monster, Ramsey was just like, he was fighting the Flash, and then while he was fighting the Flash, like, Ramsey's mom showed up. And then, then he started losing it, because he was just like, what madness is this? And then Barry told him, he was just like, because when Barry did the whole thing with the Speed Force, he was his mom showed up to him like in the form of the Speed Force. When Ramsey was talking to him, Ramsey was making creations. He was making like his, he was making Nora show up, and then he was doing like all these different things. Barry's whole thing was, Barry's like, I let you infect me so I can get into your head, and I can do the same thing to you that you did to me. So since Barry was in Ramsey's head, Barry created Ramsey's mother. And Ramsey's mother distracted Ramsey long enough for Barry to snatch Ramsey up and put him in the same machine that they had Chester in the beginning of the season, when Chester was like, losing his shit over the black hole. So they put Ramsey in the machine. He's locked up. They end up giving him to Lila, and I'm like, do they not know Lila can't be trusted? They give it to Lila in Argus. Ramsey's locked away at Argus now. The entire city's safe and everything's cool. So now the family, the OGs, including Cecile, they're all upstairs, they're in the lounge, they're talking, because Crisis is supposed to be coming at midnight, and, they're just like, oh, the Crisis is coming. Everybody was sad, and then they were saying, people were saying positive things. They're just like, oh, Barry, you helped me, you're the man, this, that, and the third. Iris even said, that when Barry, the season where Barry spent, the summer in the Speed Force, Iris actually said, that, every once in a while, because Cisco, with his vibe powers, he can vibe timelines that used to exist, because if Iris lived through something and then the timeline got changed, Iris still lived through that moment. It's just like that timeline no longer exists, but that timeline still exists in Iris's essence, because it did happen at one point. Cisco can actually vibe timelines that no longer exist. And she said that she had Cisco vibe her back to the moment in season 1 where her and Barry had their first kiss, because remember, there was a tidal wave that was supposed to be crushing Central City, and then that's when Iris found out Barry was the Flash for the first time. The two of them kissed. Barry ended up using his speed to get rid of the tidal wave, and then he ran so fast that he ended up running back in time, and then when he ran back in time, Iris forgot the whole kiss thing even existed, and then everything went to shit. But I guess he told her about it at some point, and then she had Cisco vibe her back to that moment so she could see their first kiss, and blah blah blah, which is kind of cool. And then she told him, she was like, listen, when you do the Crisis, she's like, I'm going with you, I'm gonna be there with you through the whole thing, and we gonna do this together, like Iris West Allen, you heard. So, and that I guess, and that was it. And then when after that, the sky turned red, midnight hit, and then the Crisis is now going to begin. And then it takes us to a post-credit scene with Harrison Wells. He's sitting here because he was downstairs the whole time, still trying to break into the Monitor's lair, and then the zombies try to roll up on him. And then for some reason, I think he thinks the Monitor saved him from the zombies instead of Team Flash. And then the Monitor was just like, yes, Wells, take my power and become part of me. And then Wells ends up joining him, and then he ends up fusing into the wall. So now Wells is gonna he's gonna be a messenger, the same way that Lila's a messenger, and I guess he's going to assist in preventing the Crisis. But the Crisis is here. So good 2 episodes of The Flash. We crossed the T's and dotted the I's. We got Ramsey off the show. Ralph's off the show. Camilla's off the show. Everybody who's not supposed to be a part of the crossover has now had their official exits. And December 8th, we're going to get the first 3 episodes started, and then the second 2 finish in January. So that was it. Thanks for tuning in to my review of both episodes 7, I believe 7 and 8 of the Flash parts 1 and parts 2. We're going into crossover territory. We're going to review that, and until next time, until the CW 5 event crossover, I'm out this bitch.